Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Daf Yomi, Daf 61, Omid A of Bava Metzia, using Shanshal's edition. So let's dive straight in. In the Nesach Kesef, Shaharei Kava Nema, Lo Sasich Lachicha Tenehu Inyan Levibis Kesef. If the verse is not referring to the matter of Nesach with money, as always stated in that verse, you shall not lend with interest, tashech, to your brother, indicating that taking money as interest is prohibited. Apply the expression nesech of money to the matter of ribis, i.e. tarbit with money. The Bible continues, I have derived the source of this prohibition only to go to a borrower, from whom it is prohibited to pay interest on a loan. From where it derived there is also prohibition stated with regard to a lender. The Bible answers, nesech is with regard to a borrower, and nesech is stated with regard to a lender. Just as concerning nesech with regard to a borrower, you do not distinguish with regard to it between a loan of money and a loan of food, or between whether the interest is forbidden as nesech or as ribit. So too concerning nesech stated with regard to a lender. Do not distinguish with regard to it between a loan of money and a loan of food, or between whether the interest is forbidden as nesech or as ribit. The Bible concludes, from where is it derived to include the prohibition interest of any sort? The rabbi is called Dava. Tosfos asks, being that the verse ultimately includes neshech of anything that is done with interest, what is the purpose of the verse listing the details of money and food? He explained that this results in the verse being sorted as a generalization followed by details, followed by generalization, which results in the application of the hermeneutical principle that the generalization include any entity that is similar to the details. Accordingly, money worth less than 1 pruta and the land are excluded from the prohibition of interest as they are not similar to the details. The scope of this exclusion and whether the halacha is ruled in accordance with the opinion of Tosfos is discussed in the commentaries. The verse states, neshech of anything that is done with interest. Ravina said, an excessive verse is not required, neither to derive neshech of food, nor to derive ribit of money. As if it were written, you shall not give him your money with neshech and your food with marbit, juxtaposing neshech with money alone and marbit with food alone. Or it would be, as you say, that there is a need for the derivation of the brighter. But now it is written, you shall not give him your money with neshech, and with marbit you shall not give him your food. Interposing both neshech and marbit between money and food. Read into the verse's interpretation. What does that mean? The sage interpreted verses in this manner on several occasions. It appears that the guiding principle is that if several cases are included in a single prohibition, that is, if the verse states, do not, only once, it is read as though all the cases in the verse are included in the prohibition. They are considered separate categories only when separated by the conjunction, or see also Tosfot. Your money shall not give him, you shall not give him for neshech and for marbit, and for neshech and for marbit you shall not give your food. The Gemara asks, but isn't the Tana of the Bible saying that neshech of food and type of money are derived by means of a verb analogy? Neshech is stated with regard to a borrower, and neshech is also stated with regard to a lender. Gemara and Amor state that the verb analogy is not needed. The Gemara answers, this is what Ravina is saying. Had the verse not stated the terms neshech and tabit interposed between money and food, I would have said that both terms applied to both money and food would be derived by means of an analogy. Now, as the verse stated in that manner, verb analogy is not necessary. The Gemara asks, well, why do I need this verb analogy? The Gemara explains, I need the verb analogy to teach neshech of anything that's done for interest, Deuteronomy 23:20, which is written with regard to a borrower, but not with regard to a lender, applied to a lender as well. Isha halova v'hamalva beribis. Both the lender and the borrower transgress multiple prohibitions when they conduct the transaction for a loan with interest. I must say from Mishpatim Hilchot Malva Velova 4:1. Rabbi said, why do I need it to be that the merciful one writes a prohibition with regard to interest, a prohibition with regard to robbery, Leviticus 19:13, and a prohibition with regard to exploitation, was 25:14. What was Ona'ah, exploitation? Civil law, the prohibition of exploitation refers to deceiving or taking unfair advantage of another person in a business transaction. Verse 25:14. If either the buyer or the seller takes unfair advantage of the other, the wrong party has the right to be reimbursed according to the market value of the item. By rabbinic law, this right may be exercised if either party has overcharged or underpaid up to 1/6 of the item's market value. See 49a. If the exploitation is greater than 1/6 of the item's market value, the sale is nullified. A transaction where one of the parties overcharged or underpaid, there appears to be one principle underlying all three prohibitions. One must not take possession of another's money in illegitimate ways. The Gemara explains, they are necessary, as had the most one written the prohibition under regard to interest, one could not have derived the other prohibitions from it because it is a prohibition with a novel element, a chidush, a novel element, any halacha in which there's an element that is, anomalous relative to all other halachot is considered a novelty. Halacha of this kind cannot serve as the basis for deriving the scope of other halachot. That does not appear in other halachot. The novel element is that the merciful one prohibited alone with interest even for the borrower. In light of the statement, the conscience disagree with regard to the waiving of interest, i.e. whether the borrower can waive the return of interest he paid to the lender. The owner maintained that since the prohibition against taking or paying interest is initially transgressed with the borrower's consent, his waiving the right to return interest is invalid and the lender must return it. The Raiva concurs. The Rambam and other authorities contend that just as is the case with regard to other monetary matters, here too you waive the return of interest. With regard to the two other prohibitions, there is a prohibition against taking another's money, but there is no prohibition for the victim who has his money taken. And had the merciful one written the prohibition only with regard to robbery, one could have derived the other prohibitions from it, as perhaps robbery is prohibited only due to the fact that it is an action taken against the will of the victim. But in the cases of exploitation and interest, where there is an element of consent, one would say they are not prohibited. And had the merciful one written the prohibition only with regard to exploitation, one could have derived the other prohibitions from it. As perhaps exploitation is prohibited only due to the fact that the victim does not know that he was a victim of exploitation and therefore can waive repayment. Dalayada the machel. In other words, the buyer does not always discover the exploitation. In many cases, he never finds out that he has been the victim of exploitation. Consequently, there is no certainty that he will have the opportunity to waive the return of the initial money he paid, even if he wanted to derive it. In the case of interest and robbery, the borrower and the victim respectively are aware that their money was taken and waiving repayment is possible. So perhaps these actions are not prohibited. The Gemara suggests, although no one of these prohibitions can be derived from one of the other prohibitions, perhaps one of them can be derived from the other two. Well clarified, which prohibition we derive from the other two? Then the merciful one not write the prohibition regard to interest, then derive the prohibition from these two, robbery and exploitation. The Gemara rejects that suggestion. What is notable about these prohibitions? They are notable in that they are transgressed without the consent of the victim. Will you say the same with regard to interest, which the borrower gives his consent as he agrees to accept the loan under those conditions? The Gemara suggests that the merciful one not write the prohibition with regard to exploitation and instead derive that prohibition from these two, robbery and interest. The Gemara rejects that suggestion. What is notable about these prohibitions? They are notable in that they are not transgressed in the typical manner of buying and selling. Will you say the same with regard to exploitation, which is transgressed in the context of typical buying and selling? Well, let the merciful one not write the prohibition with regard to robbery and instead derive that prohibition from these two, interest and exploitation. With what refutation will you offer? If you say, what is notable about interest? It is notable in that the prohibition of interest contains a novel element. In the case of exploitation, will prove that a novel element is not a factor. The prohibition against exploitation contains no novel element. If you say what is notable about exploitation, it is notable in that in this case the victim does not know that he was the victim of exploitation and therefore he cannot waive repayment. The case of interest will prove that the inability to waive repayment is not a factor, as the borrower is aware of the interest and able to waive repayment. The Gemara comments, and the inference has reverted to its starting point. The aspect of this case, interest, is not only the aspect of that case, exploitation. What does that mean? No izeh, karizeh. This expression is used in halachic midrash in formulation analogy where a principle is derived from two halachot mentioned in two different verses. First, the midrash articulated in between the two halachot. Then it mentions the characteristic common to them, to both. Any other case where that common denominator can then be subject to the same ruling. And the aspect of that case, exploitation is not like that. Not like the aspect of this case, interest. The common denominator is that one robs another of money, i.e. takes money from another that is not due to him. I'll also bring the prohibition against robbery, which shares a common denominator, and derived from two other prohibitions. The sages said, indeed the prohibition against robbery is superfluous, but if the prohibition against robbery can be derived from the prohibition against interest and exploitation, why don't need the prohibition written in the Torah with regard to robbery? Mishnah Lamelech asked, but is the prohibition against robbery necessary for robbing the temple treasury consecrated property, since interest and exploitation do not apply to consecrated items? And the answer is given in Mitzvah Eten. Since it prohibits to derive any benefit from consecrated items due to the prohibition to the consecrated property, there is no need for a special prohibition with regard to robbery. The Gemara answers, that verse is not written to prohibit a standard case of robbery, rather it serves to prohibit the action of one who withholds the wages of a hired laborer. Kover Sachir, one who refrains from paying his hired laborer under the 5 prohibitions and a positive mitzvah. These include you shall not oppress a hired worker, and you shall not steal from a safe and potem. Hirut 11:1 Shulchan Aruch Mitzvah 39:2. In that case, unlike robbery, the employee does not take money from the laborer; he merely fails to pay him his wages. The Gemara challenges, with regard to one who withholds wages of a hired laborer, is explicitly written, you shall not oppress a hired laborer who is poor and destitute, Deuteronomy 24:14. There is no need to derive this prohibition from the verse concerning robbery. The Gemara answers, it is written so that withholding the wages of a hired laborer always involves violating 2 prohibitions. The Gemara asks, let us interpret the verse concerning robbery as prohibiting interest or exploitation, and say it is written so that these prohibitions always involve violating 2 prohibitions. Gemara answers, prohibition against robbery is applied to the case of withholding wages of high labor because it is a matter derived from its context. And this prohibition is written in the context of the matter of hired labor, and you shall not oppress your neighbor, nor rob him, and the wages of a hired servant shall not abide with you all night until morning in Leviticus 19:13. That's the end of Amud A. I wish you a very good day and peace in Israel. All the best. Bye.